All right, welcome into Cleveland Browns Daily here on a first Friday. Nathan Zegura, Jason Gibbs with you for the next 2 hours. Got a lovely show lined up for you here today, which is always a fun thing. I was out yesterday having fun, but again, a vacation day when you can't put the ball in the air doesn't feel like a vacation day. End of March. Come on, Cleveland. Let's do a little bit better. I heard there might be some more snow coming in the next 7 days. Yikes, we're over it. But we're not going to dwell on that. What I will tell you is that we have some highlights from General Manager Andrew Berry and Chief Strategy Officer Paul D. Podesta's meeting with the media at the owners' meetings in Florida from yesterday. We've got a ton of great stuff with both of them. That's coming your way at 1:15 for Part 1, Part 2 at 2 o'clock. Continuing our look at what all of the opponents on our schedule have done this offseason. We'll take our look at the AFC East. Buffalo, a Super Bowl favorite. New England, Miami, and the Jets as well. That's at the bottom of this hour. And hour number 2, I mentioned Part 2 of AB and Depot. At 2:15, Jordan Reed from ESPN says the biggest needs and the best fit for 8 teams without first-round picks. And he talks, obviously, about us, the Cleveland Browns. And I think a lot of people feel like that pick can go really only one of 2 ways. And those 2 ways are wide receiver or defensive line help, whether that be edge rusher or an interior pass rusher, but somebody, an impact player along the defensive line at number 44. 2:30, we do a little better or worse, this time coming from ESPN's NFL Nation post-free agency power rankings, and then we'll be wrapping things up. But while I was gone yesterday, give me a little bit of news. The Browns signed center Ethan Posick. He was just 26 years old, 40 career starts with the Seahawks, former second-round draft choice. And he's going to come in and likely be the backup to Nick Harris. I think it will be Nick Harris's job to lose in that room as the center, the young man the Browns drafted and like a lot. But Posick brings some veteran experience. And, after the release of J.C. Tretter, our good friend of the show, the Browns only had one true center on the roster. Yes, guys like Blake Hance had dabbled at center. Michael Dunn had dabbled at center. But in terms of a true center, Nick Harris was the only one. And when you get a guy with second-round talent, you bring him in and to this system with Bill Callahan, you're banking on Bill Callahan doing what he's done throughout his entire career, which is getting the best out of offensive linemen. So he was a good run blocker last year, had a 76.0 run blocking grade at Pro Football Focus, which was 11th among centers. Struggled as a pass blocker, though. So that's something that I'm guessing the Browns think that Bill Callahan can help him with. But he brings some depth. I'm sure he'll be given the opportunity to compete, but that it will be Nick Harris's job to lose. If Harris can just come in and show the form that he did against Green Bay, and I can tell you, like I said, I see him here working out hard all the time, getting his body ready to be the Browns starting center. So that is a good thing there. I don't think this move it is a monster move. It's a good quality depth move on a guy, and it's kind of Andrew Berry's MO. First or a second-round pick, a guy that had a lot of talent, get him in here with our coaching staff to provide that depth. And I think it makes it with a team that, doesn't have those early picks, we're going to be able to really focus our draft picks, receiver, defensive line, especially early, maybe some specialists as well. Kickers and punters, I think, have to be potentially in the mix for the Browns in this draft. But I think it kind of takes interior offensive linemen maybe off of the draft board because you've got, Harris, you've got Bitonio, you've got Teller, you've got Dunn, you've got Hance and Posick now. That's 6 guys on the interior that you probably feel pretty good about.
Yeah, and that's what I said yesterday.
Elite.
I was a little surprised yesterday. I went and looked, depth chart. I'm like, where does he fit? You forget that Dunn and Hance are other positions on the offensive line, but they have played a little center. But, we only had one center. You've got to get another guy, and that it goes back to they probably need another tackle in there as well, or 2 to come in and compete for roster spots. And I thought it was a great move. It's under the radar, but again, you want to run the ball and you want to keep Deshaun Watson upright. And this is a step towards that.
There's no doubt. If you just were to look at the offensive line depth chart right now, as you kind of mentioned, we went through the starters. So you got Wills, Bitonio, you've got Nick Harris, we'll call him the starter for now. You've got Wyatt Teller, you've got Jack Conklin. We'll see about his status. On the back, you've got Dunn. You can put at left guard. You can put Posick now at center. You can put Blake Hansel, call it at the right guard, and then you've got James Hudson as your swing tackle on the other side. So you've got your swing tackle. You probably need somebody else on the outside, but there are veterans and guys. Chris Hubbard's a guy very familiar with the Browns that, you could look at maybe bringing him back now that he's got his health status. And so he's a guy that –
and I believe he will come back.
He is back, right,
yeah.
for this year. So I feel pretty good about that, honestly, overall. On March 16th, that's right. He re-signed a one-year contract a couple weeks ago. There's a little bit going on at that time, so unfortunately that one kind of slipped through. But Hubbard's a guy. We mentioned 40 – I think he made over 40 starts for the Browns at right tackle. He started at all 5 positions. If you think about a team is going to keep 10 offensive linemen, I mean, you've got 10 right there. Now, we don't know what Hubbard's like coming back from that injury, but obviously Chris Hubbard fan on this show, certainly.
I was going to say, you have some questions at the tackle position with Hubbard and with Conklin, coming back from injuries.
Sure.
I mean, Hubbard's battled injuries the last couple of years. So I think that still has to be a position that the Browns look at on stacking another body or two in there to compete. But inside, you're too deep at every position on the inside. You feel real good about the inside portion of the program.
You do, but I mean, Hudson, this is a guy you drafted who had some inexperience, and some of that showed in his play as a rookie, but he's a guy that you're hoping, in another year in the system, another year with Bill Callahan, that he's going to be able to take some steps for you here in year 2, and that's why he was drafted, was to be that guy. And Chris Hubbard, as we said, a reliable veteran. If he can come back from the injury, and he's had a knee injury that ended his 2020 season, 2021, it was a triceps injury that he had that ended that season. And so can he come back and regain that form where he's just reliable? If you need to put him in, he needs to make a few starts, he can do that. And he did that in the 2020 season, the playoff season, early in the year for Conklin. He stepped in a few times and was very good. He got hurt at the end at week 15. So I really, really, really like kind of where you're at. And if you could kind of pencil in these 10 as your 10, I mean, that's not a bad 10. Wills, Bitonio, Harris, Teller, Conklin, James Hudson, Chris Hubbard, Dunn, Posick, and Blake Hance. That's a nice group.
On March 30th, to already be too deep at every position on the offensive line, it's pretty impressive.
It is very impressive.
And you're not just putting a guy in there like to fill that too deep. Like, it's a guy that has starting experience in the NFL. Every one of those guys.
All of them have started.
Yeah.
All of them have started. Done in a big playoff game. I mean, you're talking about and a couple games last year. Hans started at least 8-9 games last year. Posick started 40 times in his career. Hudson made some starts in his rookie season, and Hubbard started over 40 games in his career. So, yeah, you're talking about a very, very good and very deep offensive line room for the Cleveland Browns. And that's an important thing, as you mentioned. Look, for this offense and for this team being stout up front, one of the reasons Deshaun Watson enjoyed one of the things that he said about or enjoyed about this roster was it'll be the best offensive line he's ever played behind. And so that's a big deal. And keeping that together is a big deal. And the Browns certainly have that. They've got those tackles, and they obviously feel comfortable. And that's why you do the succession planning. Remember, they moved back in the second round the year that they got Grant Delpit, a couple of picks, picked up a fifth rounder that turned into Nick Harris. So that was good thinking then and planning for the future. But at the same time, it was the confidence that you could move back in your research, so you could move back, still get your guy, which they did, and then be able to add another player who's now a starter for you. So to move back a few spots, they still got Grant Delpit and they got Nick Harris. And that's one of the reasons why this team is, as good as it is. And you've got some other guys that are going to be able to compete. Froholt was on your roster, active for a few times at the guard position last year. Drew Forbes still in the mix for the Browns. So there are quite a few guys on this offensive line and some good, as we said, a combination of veterans and also new faces that are going to be competing to really make this football team and to do it in a very effective way and to keep this offensive line and the continuity of this offensive line and what it means. That's what you're looking at. And that's what I think you've got, as you talked about, being too deep already at so many positions is honestly, it's kind of remarkable if we're being just straight up about it. This is a nice, easy addition with Posick to give you that center that you needed.
And how many times last year did all 5 starters play in a game together? It wasn't many.
No.
All 5 were on the field.
No. In fact, last year was 0.
Yeah.
0. That they started and finished a game together was 0.
So you better have, the other day we talked about depth at the quarterback position, depth at the running back position. Well, depth at the offensive line position with guys who already know a system and know how to play and have starting experience is invaluable.
It certainly is. And that's why I think that these moves, while, on the offensive line, big loss in J.C. Tretter, but that's why you drafted Nick Harris and you feel comfortable that he's ever able to take over. And then behind him, you got Ethan Posick now, who has 40 career starts and a guy that's familiar with wide zone, bootleg schemes, blocked for Russell Wilson, so he will understand what the Browns would be asking of him. Now, Harris was excellent in pass blocking in that game against the Green Bay Packers, and so that is one of the reasons that the Browns do feel as comfortable in Nick Harris as they do. He gets that start. If you remember, that was on Christmas Day, and that was a big game. 42 pass blocking snaps for Nick Harris. Do you know how many pressures he allowed?
Goose egg.
0. Same as you and I. Only guy on the offensive line in that game that did not allow a single pressure. Remember, in that game, the Browns starting offensive line in that game was Joel Bitonio at left tackle, Michael Dunn at left guard, Harris at center, at right guard Wyatt Teller, and right tackle was Blake Hant. So the only people who played in their actual original positions, right guard was Wyatt Teller out of your 5 normal starters. Yes, Bitonio also played, but he played left tackle and did so very well, by the way. And then Nick Harris who's a natural center, but wasn't your starting center. That was the game you had one of your 5 starting in their original spot. And we still ran the ball in that game for a gajillion. And so that and the pass blocking there gave a lot of comfort. The Browns ultimately ran in that game 24 times for 219 yards, 9.1 a carry. Dearness Johnson averaged 14.5 a carry. Chubb 7.4, and 2 runs by Anthony Schwartz for 12 yards a carry in that one as they just dominated Green Bay on the ground. Baco Nation walking by right there, getting a big shout out. You got to love to see that. The people here in the Cross Country Mortgage campus. But this is minor move, smart move, depth, experience, familiarity with the scheme, bringing it in and giving yourself insurance. And now where the Browns had invested so much into that position, they are going to have not a significant financial investment, but 2 guys that they feel are capable of getting the job done. So good job by Andrew Berry. And we'd be remiss if we did not wish the general manager of the Cleveland Browns a happy birthday. So happy birthday to AB. I hope he's getting some nice and well-deserved, well-earned R&R today.
Got a feeling the Breakers is still maybe ground zero for that.
It may just you stay there. Maybe you just stay.
Why wouldn't you?
It's a phenomenal resort. I
mean,
there's no doubt. It's a phenomenal resort indeed. All right. Oh, also, a couple other things. New overtime.
You missed a few things yesterday.
New overtime rule. Break it down for me, Gibby. What is it?
I was all for it right up to the point where it said it's only for the postseason and not for regular season. So basically, Browns are playing the Squealers. We go to overtime in the playoffs. Who wouldn't like that at First Energy Stadium?
Oh, baby.
Squealers get first possession. They don't do anything, or they do something. They do something. Instead of sudden death, the Browns would get the ball back and be able to answer. Okay? Now, if the Squealers took now there will be 15 minutes on the clock for overtime. 15 minutes is normally it's 10 in overtime. It goes to 15. Say the Squealers take 12 or 13 minutes. Browns get the ball with only 2 minutes. They don't have to score in that 2 minutes.
They get their full possession.
They can get the full possession. The clock will just reset to 15. So I liked everything about it up until I saw it's postseason only. I don't understand why it's only postseason. Why can't you do this in the regular season?
So what they said is in the regular season over history, the team winning since 2012, the teams winning the coin toss have won 50% of the time according to league data. That number has ticked up a bit to 54% since the league shortened overtime to 10 minutes. But in the postseason, there's been a big jump. 7 of the 12 overtime games have been won on the opening possession, and 10 of those 12 were won by the team that won the coin toss. So a total of 12 games is not a large sample size, but it's significant enough to prompt change because the postseason games mean so much to a franchise's trajectory, its history, all of those things. So this allows, as you said, everybody to get the ball. Owners approved one additional rule change and one resolution. First, they made permanent an experiment that adjusted positioning in the setup zone on kickoffs were designed to increase recovery rates for onside kicks, corresponded with a rise of onside kick recoveries to 13.5%. Then they had some other thing about tampering. But
it does.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
So if the first team that gets the ball scores, the second team gets the ball, matches that score.
That's where I was going. Then it becomes sudden death.
With the team that originally won the toss getting the ball first.
Correct.
Or if they, I guess you could
defer. It just
but
goes
no.
back to. Yeah, so it does become sudden death after each team has a possession.
Possess the ball. Yep.
I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that. I wonder. I was reading a piece late yesterday, and I wonder if more teams will go for 2 if they score a touchdown, if they're the first possession team.
Say that again?
So the team that gets the ball first,
yes,
if they go down and score a touchdown. I was reading an article, and I can't remember who I was reading, but they were saying it was going to make a lot more sense for teams to go for 2 then in the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely.
On that first possession if you score first.
Absolutely. You're going to see a lot of teams go for 2, and there might be some team. And then I saw something, well, why don't you just onside kick it? Because if you recover, doesn't that eliminate their possession? And I don't know what the rule on that would be. I don't know if they would say that, look, you can't do an onside kick at the beginning. But at the same time, if you did an onside kick and you don't get it, which is even at these higher rates is 87% that you will not be getting on. You're giving them the ball basically in field goal range.
But then you get the ball still.
Right, but ideally what you want to do is kick it off to them, make them punt you the ball back, and then all you got to do is go get a field goal to win. That's the ideal scenario, is to go play defense or get a turnover or any of those things.
Yeah, so it because in the past, you always wanted the ball first in overtime. Everybody wants the ball first in overtime. Does that change now? Do you want the ball more? Do you want to differ? If
you've decided that you are going to go for 2 on that touchdown no matter what, then you want the ball second. Because the advantage of having the ball second is if they have scored, that you're going for it on every fourth down. Well, you have 4 downs now to get 10 yards every time. And you know what you need. Field goal, touchdown. I think you do that if you know you're going to go for 2. Because if you don't know that you're going to go for 2, unless there's another coin flip after the first 2 possessions, which it sounds like not, it'll be the team that got the ball first would then get the ball third in this scenario. So if you know you're ending it on your possession period, good, bad, indifferent, then you want to go second because then you have all the information. But if you're not, then you want to go first because that way if it does end up tied, you have the ball first in sudden death. Because the one thing we're not talking about is, well, what if neither team scores?
Which is a possibility in the playoffs.
Of course it is. So that says, to me, that means that you want to get the ball first, unless you have made the decision, and which I like this thought of it. I'm going to end this game on my possession, period. And then that knowledge gives me the ability, if they score, it gives me the ability to just go for it on that you're going on 4th downs. I'd like to have 4 downs to get 10 yards instead of 3 downs to get 10 yards, which is what the first team has. But at the same time, if they don't score, now you're back in that same situation. That's an interesting one. I can't wait to ask Coach. We saw our guy Kovash walking by. He knows the probabilities. I'd be very curious.
His ankle, I think.
He did. Running accident. I was talking to him down there.
Yeah, that's why you don't run.
Heal up, Kovash. Fine, man. So, yeah, that's interesting. Then the other thing that's interesting that at the end of the day is not all that interesting, right, is that the Niners are saying, look, we might actually keep Jimmy Garoppolo. We're able to afford him. Guess what? The last two seasons that Jimmy Garoppolo was healthy and was our quarterback, we've gone to the Super Bowl and the NFC Championship. So we've been in the Final Four of the league both of those seasons, the final two once. Now, they haven't won the Super Bowl yet, and they do feel like they want to have, that's why they drafted Trey Lance. They gave up all those ones to get him, but they are not forced to move on from Jimmy Garoppolo. I thought that's interesting. I think it's more posturing. When you give up 3 ones to get a quarterback, you want that guy to be your quarterback. And then that's what they did. They gave up, their 2 future ones to move up and to pick Trey Lance. So there have been 2 trades, 3 ones in recent history, Lance, and the other being the Browns to get Deshaun Watson. Which
it's not a horrible thing if Trey Lance doesn't play.
You gave up a lot to have the guy not play for 2 years.
But it is what it is. Like, if you still have Garoppolo and you can't get rid of him, which I don't know if they're going to be able to.
Well, I think there are plenty of teams that would want Garoppolo. It just matters
the price tag.
What the price tag is.
Yeah.
I mean, the Commanders trade for Carson Wentz looks worse and worse by the day. Jim Irsay was basically like, dude, this guy we needed to get him out of here. Like, it was terrible. It was a disaster. What did he say? Thank the lucky stars that we have Matt Ryan now, which was just incredible. But they still were able to get something for him, which I found to be stunning. I mean, when you think about what the Commanders gave up, pretty big relative to what the Colts gave up just to get Matt Ryan, who's certainly better in a 1 or 2 year scenario. I realize, and the Colts were convinced already that Wentz wasn't their franchise quarterback. The Eagles have been convinced of that. So is maybe the Commanders think third time's a charm, but it doesn't seem that way. Anyway, that's wild. I do think the Niners could end up keeping Jimmy Garoppolo, and there's no rush for them per se, right? Let Lance come in, and if Lance is looking good and you feel comfortable, maybe there's an injury, you have an opportunity to move him for a very high price. But at the same time, you have Jimmy G in there. You can run the offense, and you can beat anybody in the league. I mean, the Niners in the final month of the season beat the Rams in L.A., and they beat the Bengals in Cincinnati. Now, they lose to the Rams in the NFC Championship game, but they were right there. So they beat both teams who were in the Super Bowl, including the Super Bowl champions, with Jimmy Garoppolo, leading them on come-from-behind drives at the end of the game-winning drives.
By the way, did you see Kyle Shanahan? He looked like he was 80 years old. I don't know if it was the camera angle, the light. I don't know what it was. Our guy looked old.
Yeah. I think it's stressful.
I mean, we're old.
You work so hard in this business to win a Super Bowl. And for Kyle, as an offensive coordinator, you've got the Falcons Super Bowl, which I'm sure took years off of his life. And then now you get to the Super Bowl, and if there isn't a blown coverage on a 3rd and 15, you probably win that one. And then now you're in the NFC Championship. And look, if you're the Niners, you'd already beaten the Bengals. I think if the Niners got to the Super Bowl, they're going to feel pretty good about their ability to win that Super Bowl because their D-line would have been able to dominate the Bengals' offensive line, even I think in a more significant way than the Rams did, although the Rams did a very good job with it. So I think there's a lot of stress there and a lot of knowledge that it's not easy to even be where we've been, and yet where we've been hasn't been good enough. And I think that'll age you a little bit. That'll give you some tough times there. All right, coming up next from the owners' meetings in Florida.
I don't know if anybody's heard.
This is a CBD exclusive, I believe.
Yeah.
CBD exclusive. Andrew Barry, the Browns general manager, and the birthday boy and chief strategy officer Paul D. Podesta, part 1 of their meeting with the media, up next. Rumpke Waste and Recycling is a family-owned and operated company. Whether you join them as a customer or as an employee, you'll become a part of the family. Visit www.rumpke.com, rumpke.com, to learn more. All right, highlights now from Browns General Manager Andrew Berry and Chief Strategy Officer Paul DePodesta's meeting with the media at the owners' meetings in Florida. It's the first time you're going to hear this on the radio. You're going to hear it right now.
We have to start with.
You guys are down 13 minutes.
First things first.
Yeah, no, I think we're excited to bring Ethan into the mix. He's really actually played from his time at LSU through the pros, all up and down the offensive line. I think you guys know how much we think of that position group in general. Always want guys who can compete and are versatile, so we think it'll be a good veteran signing for us, and we're looking forward to seeing him in camp.
So is that like a competition between him and Harris to fill JC's starting position he had locked down for 5 years, or how do you look at that?
Yeah, Ethan will definitely be in the mix. We obviously feel really good about Nick Harris. Felt like he played really well in the Green Bay game when he filled in for JC, but once we get to camp, everybody's got to really get into the job, and Ethan gives us another buzz.
On the record, where do you stand with Baker?
Look, I think as we look at the quarterback position room, we have three good players at the most important position in sports. That's not to say that there aren't things that we're going to work through over the course of over the next several months, but don't view it as a bad situation at all. We feel like we have three good ones, and a lot of teams are still looking for one guy. So we don't mind being deep there, and we'll take it as it goes as we go.
Are you willing to give up a pick or pay part of the salary to trade him if that?
Yeah, I wouldn't really go into that type of speculation, but the reality of it is quarterbacks are valuable. Baker's a good player, and can't have enough good players on your roster. We've already planned to make it work, and we'll just see how the next few months go.
And is there some wisdom perhaps in trying to turn the page as soon as possible on the Baker situation and doing whatever it takes to kind of be able to just move forward with Deshaun and not have a different distraction hanging over your head?
I wouldn't say that we have a specific timetable for the quarterback room. Baker's a professional. He's under contract. We have the level of flexibility, whether he's on the roster or not. So we don't really feel pressed to rush into anything that's suboptimal.
But you don't have any expectation that Baker will be at off-season workouts?
I'm sorry?
You don't have any expectation that Baker will be at off-season workouts or anything?
Yeah, realistically, that's probably a better question for him. We know the programs are voluntary for all of our guys, and that's part of what's been collectively bargained, but we feel like all of our guys will be ready once we get to the camp.
I know you talk about taking pride in communicating with players and agents. With Baker, when it came to pursuing Deshaun Watson, did that fall short, or do you think you kind of met your standard on communicating that?
Nate, we were pretty open with Baker and his camp in terms of how we view the position. I will keep those conversations private for obvious reasons. Quite honestly, if there's probably the one thing that I would regret or kind of go back differently, when we had been notified that we were one of the teams that Deshaun wanted to meet with, late that Monday night, set up a visit. I had set up a call for Baker's representation the following morning. The news got out before I was able to take that call. You always hate those type of situations because it kind of gives off the appearance of that. That's never how you want someone to find out about that situation. That's the one thing I wish I had done a little bit differently. But on the whole, we have been pretty candid in terms of where we sit at the quarterback position, really, since very early in the process.
Paul, what was your role in helping facilitate this trade?
Well, I think not just sort of this trade, but the offseason in general was in all the meetings, sort of in there the whole time from the beginning. I think AB mentioned that this specific deal was sort of a months-long process. So really in the discussions from the beginning. And I think just like everybody else, sort of on a similar journey, in terms of trying to get to the point where we felt comfortable with it.
But this was the trade of trades. This was different than the Mack Wilson trade, right? So
I mean, were you involved for months in looking at picks and salary cap and all of that stuff, the implications?
Oh yeah, and it's not just even the two of us plus Kevin plus ownership. There are a lot of people in football operations that were involved sort of throughout.
Right. There's a thought that the first round picks are gold, and Kevin even used that term yesterday. So he gave up a bunch of them. I don't know. I know regret's not the word, but just how do you feel about not having a first round pick for the next 3 years?
You know, I think we look at it as like picks, dollars, whether that's cap dollars or cash. It's really all in terms of your pool of resources, and ultimately where can you apply those resources to have the biggest impact. So we feel comfortable. Look, every team will tell you that they want as many picks and cap dollars as they can take. But as we think about how we distribute them or how we apply them across the roster, we feel good about this.
Yeah, if we think about it in terms of both sort of current roster value and future roster value, and that's in terms of cap space, picks, players. You'd like to have those three things amount to a lot, but ultimately it comes down to current roster value, right? I mean, that's why we're here. It's not to have the most draft picks or the most cap space. It's ultimately to have the best team. So if you could tell us that those future first round picks would turn into all pros, assuredly at the most important position on the field, that's one thing, but that's not really reality. So I think when we had an opportunity to take those future assets and just create significantly more sort of current roster value for our team, we did that. But it's not something we do lightly.
Paul, we haven't had a chance to get your first impressions or your feelings or thoughts on why you reached a comfort level with bringing Deshaun onto the team and into the community, and why anybody else should have a comfort level with it. So if you would.
Sure, I think a lot of it's probably been said. I was on the same journey as everyone else, and I think just as we got more and more information, sort of all the steps that we took, all the diligence that we undertook, all the people we talked to, again, all the additional information we got, and especially the perspectives we got from some of the different people involved or much more involved with him, ultimately got to the same place that the rest of us did, where we were, really comfortable with the person. But yeah, nothing different really than probably what you've heard from everyone else.
And do you guys feel like you talked to enough people on both sides of the issue in terms of reaching the conclusions that you did?
Absolutely. And I'll say this, I think it was maybe Monday. The deal ended up we did it on Friday. So at the very beginning of that week, that night, I texted AB and I just said, this has been the most detailed and dogged, potential acquisition of a player that I've ever witnessed. I mean, in 25 plus years across two different sports, I'd never been a part of anything like it that was, again, just sort of so detailed, so thorough. And whether we ended up, at that point, we didn't know whether we were going to get him or not, but it really was pretty remarkable the lengths I think everybody went to get comfortable with the situation.
So how did you guys arrive at, a comfort level with his situation is one thing, and then a comfort level with the record-setting deal? How did you get there? And have you felt backlash? Because, we asked Jimmy and Dee, but Peter King basically said that people around the NFL are pissed off that the Browns gave this record-setting deal to Deshaun Watson. The fully guaranteed deal.
I don't know that that's anything that we should really worry about. We have enough to worry about with our own team and our own roster. We can't realistically make decisions with our competitors in mind. So that's not something that we really give a lot.
Okay, so
I can tell you, I'm dating myself here, but I remember where I was in my car driving toward Cleveland Heights when on the radio I heard that Gary Sheffield was going to get paid $10 million a year, like AAV, right? Record setting. the reality is those records get broken pretty much every year, and now again, that was maybe close to 25 years ago. You look back, it's sort of quaint that was a big deal that someone got to 10 million. So it's not that we don't take it lightly, but I doubt it'll be a record for very long.
Current roster value, how much do you guys need that 18.86 that Baker's currently worth?
We are situated in a manner where we can do what we need to do moving forward, regardless of how the quarterback shakes out.
And is that in part because Deshaun's base is so low, so that if you look at the quarterback salaries in total, that even if you had to carry that on the cap for a while, you're comfortable?
I think it's this. It's less just in a vacuum of what's happening within the quarterback room, but really how we've organized and positioned our contracts across the roster and throughout the next several seasons. So we have enough flexibility to do what we need to do.
Paul, when you were hired 6 years ago, is there any credence to the thought that it was for this trade? Like all the work you've been doing is to make sure everybody's ready for that one big swing at quarterback?
No, I don't think so. Certainly I think when AB and I both first came aboard 6 years ago, getting quarterback sort of right has been a priority, from the beginning. There aren't that many of them out there, right? And we felt, in 2018, felt we had landed a very, very good one. And I think to this day, we would tell you we still believe, really strongly in Baker as a starting quarterback in this league. I think he's going to be really good for a really long time. But it is unusual, to have an opportunity, to acquire a player like this. So, again, I think quarterback's sort of always been a priority, but I don't think if we sat down 5-6 years ago, I don't think we'd envision that we'd be in this scenario.
Has it been a fast 6 years or a long 6 years?
There were parts that were long, but it's amazing that it's sort of been that long already. Now it feels like it's gone pretty quickly, but I think we're clearly in a very different stage than we were back then.
When you look at the Rams just won the Super Bowl trading all their picks, and we've seen, I can't even remember the amount of high draft picks that were traded this month. Is this an anomaly, or is this going to be the new trend in the NFL? Because we've never seen pick trading to this extreme that we've seen the last few weeks.
My sense is it's probably a little bit of a trend. That's honestly just a blind guess, to be honest with you. But I do think that you're seeing the NFL over the past couple of years that's maybe trending a little bit more like the NBA in spirit in that regard. But only time will tell. We'll see.
How about any updates?
Back at 30.
Such as Jarvis Landry, and I talked to his agent yesterday. He said there's mutual interest. So Jarvis, Jadeveon, how are things going with those guys?
I wouldn't comment on any specific player, but we're definitely keeping kind of our pulse on the markets and any opportunity that allows us to upgrade at some of the different position groups. We do have a sense of where some of our guys who are on the 2021 team, are currently, but it's something that we'll continue to sort through really through the trading deadline, but probably intensely until we get to camp. And obviously we're trying to marry all of that with, what.
All right, we're coming back.
So not going until 40.
You're up.
All right, that's part one. We'll have part two coming up at the top of the hour, 2 o'clock. That is Andrew Berry and Paul DePodesta from the owners' meetings in Florida. And a couple of things stood out there to me there, Gibbe. Number one, they said, that is typically they do not want to give up, picks and future assets. But he said it's not all about picks and cap space. It's about the best team. And we created significant current roster value, and that's not something that we take lightly and not something that they would do unless they felt there was that chance. And he also heard, look, from the entire time I've been here, one thing I've been tasked with is getting the quarterback position to be elite. And while, they felt badly about the way that news leaked before they were able to talk to Baker about the actual trip down to Houston, they felt that if they had an opportunity to get an elite player at that position, they were going to do whatever they could to do so. And obviously this one was even more complicated. As Paul DePodesta said, 22 years in 2 different professional sports. He has never been part of such a thorough vetting of a player or a deal on how to put it together as it was for the Browns to acquire quarterback Deshaun Watson. But that's what really stood out to me there from those two in that part one.
I mean, anytime that you get a chance to hear from Paul DePodesta,
always good.
You learn something. And I think it was interesting. You know, I mean, AB said it. He felt bad that Baker's camp found out before we could talk to them. Unfortunately, leaks happen.
Yep.
You know, but I always find it fascinating, and this goes back to the conversation that you, Beau, and I have had. You know, how many teams are going to try to follow the Los Angeles Rams method of winning? Like, first-round draft picks, how much do they mean to you? If you can go get the guy that could potentially put you over the top.
Right, and that's what it's about. I think everybody is you want to get that Super Bowl win, and that's what everybody is certainly looking for, and that is, again, you can't do that without the quarterback position being elite. It just feels that way in this year's NFL, and I think that Kansas City-Buffalo playoff game was such an eye-opener for so many people around the league that it was like, oh, yeah, okay, so that's exactly how it's got to be. If we don't do this, we're not going to be able to be in this conversation without everything else going right. And, you know, I liken it back to, I think having an elite quarterback in the NFL was like having LeBron James in the NBA, especially when he was with the Cavs. Cavs didn't win it every year, but you knew they were in it every year. And could everything else fall into place for them to win a title? No, obviously it did happen the one time. But if you don't have that quarterback, I don't know that you're necessarily in that conversation. You say, well, Nathan, the Niners did it with Jimmy G twice. And yes, Jimmy G has been he's not on the level of the truly elites year after year. He needs a lot of things to go his way. And you know how much of that is Kyle Shanahan, but he also didn't win a Super Bowl. I mean, you look at the guys who are winning Super Bowls, and it is the elite elites. That's why Matt Stafford was brought to the Rams. Tom Brady wins a lot of Super Bowls. I mean, the last time that you won a Super Bowl without an elite was Nick Foles. But other than that, it's a lot of Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady. That's what it's been for a long time now. You know, Peyton Manning before that, Drew Brees. I mean, these are the guys. Aaron Rodgers only has one. I mean, think about that. But they're always in the mix, and they do have the one. That's what it's about in the league now. And the Browns have put themselves in that position with the acquisition of Deshaun Watson.
Well, and you'll hear it in part two. You know, the guys were both asked. You know, we spent a lot of time, and rightfully so, talking about the off-the-field issues and situation. They get into a little bit more about Deshaun Watson, the player, in segment two. And you can tell, like, there are certain things that just separate certain quarterbacks, and he has those elite traits.
He certainly does. All right, when we come back, we will take a look at some of the moves that have been made in the AFC East this offseason. Take a look at that. Still to come in hour number 2. We have got part 2 of Andrew Berry and Paul DePodesta with the media at the owners' meetings in Florida. Jordan Reed on the biggest needs and best fits for the 8 teams without first-round picks. That obviously includes the Cleveland Browns. And then we will do a little better or worse and get things going here on a Friday here on Cleveland Browns Daily. Ohio Business Machines, preferred copier provider to the Cleveland Browns with all the X's and O's for your office. Call 216-485-2000 or visit ohiobusinessmachines.com today. All right, we're going to take a look at more of the Browns' opponents, what they've done this offseason. Today we look at the AFC East, which, boy, not so easy after some of the moves this offseason, especially down with Miami, even the Jets a little bit. We knew Buffalo was going to be a Super Bowl contender, so here's what Buffalo has done. And again, when you're a team that already has locked in that franchise quarterback as they do with Josh Allen, it makes it a lot easier. They've already got kind of that Super Bowl caliber roster. So what did they do? The big move. They brought in Von Miller, 6-year, $120 million deal. They were already a top-ranked unit in the entire NFL and DVOA last season. So you add Miller. In addition to Miller, they've added defensive end Shaq Lawson on a 2-year contract. They added defensive tackle Daquan Jones on a 2-year contract, and Tim Settle on a 2-year, $9 million deal with a max value of $10.6 million.
I feel like they were already in great shape on the defensive line, but clearly they didn't feel that way.
That's right. They also retained Jordan Phillips. They also brought in Jordan Phillips, who had been with the Cardinals. Settle had been with the Commanders. Shaq Lawson with the Jets. And they were able to bring all of these guys into the mix. They re-signed their cornerback, Ciaran Neal, on a 3-year deal. But Von Miller, that's the headliner, right? But you did so much on that side of the football to kind of keep your team loaded up. In terms of their offensive line, they signed center Mitch Morse to a 2-year, $19.5 million extension, including $12 million guaranteed. They brought in O.J. Howard, a former first-round pick, on a 1-year deal. They brought in Roger Saffold of the Titans on a 1-year deal, the guard. They brought in Duke Johnson, formerly of the Browns, who had a very nice season with the Miami Dolphins last year, and to fill kind of that pass-catching role. Remember, J.D. McKissick was supposed to sign with the Bills, then changed his mind. He goes back to the Commanders, and Duke Johnson gets signed to take on that role. Isaiah McKenzie is back on a 2-year deal, their wide receiver. Jay Kumaro, wide receiver, also back. And then they added, with Cole Beasley departing, we'll get to that in a second, Jamison Crowder on a 1-year, $4 million deal that I think is a nice, just kind of under-the-radar fit. And, in fact, CBS says one of the most underrated signings of all of free agency, the ideal third receiver to place along Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, the clear upgrade over Cole Beasley, who's been very, very productive there. O.J. Howard forms a nice 1-2 combination. Dawson Knox, the number 1 tight end, but Howard will be the number 2. They got a good quality veteran backup in Case Keenum, acquired in a trade with the Browns for a 2022 7th-round pick, and they re-signed Matt Barkley to a 1-year deal. So lots of ins. The big thing, obviously, Von Miller. I think the big thing as well on the line, Shaq Lawson, Daquan Jones, Jordan Phillips, but also bringing in, I think, Jamison Crowder, a good move. Duke Johnson as well. So who did they lose from this roster? Mitch Trubisky goes to the Steelers, where he's going to compete for a starting job. Matt Breida, the running back, goes to the Giants. He didn't do much for them at all last year. In fact, was a complete non-factor. Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders, who were going into the season last year the numbers 2 and 3 receivers. Now, this year, though, the number 2 receiver is going to be Gabe Davis, and if you don't know who that is, just watch the Chiefs and the Bills playoff game. You'll be very familiar with him quickly. And Crowder replaces Beasley, and with O.J. Howard, they have a better second tight end than they had before. Other than that, Harrison Phillips, he goes to the Vikings. Star Lutulele, still an unsigned free agent. Effie Obata goes to the Commanders. Vernon Butler to the Raiders. Levi Wallace, the corner, to the Steelers. They didn't really lose anything of consequence. I mean, I think probably the biggest losses would be Beasley and Sanders. They were able to replace Sanders with Davis, and they replaced Beasley with Crowder. And they just got better with Miller, Lawson, and Phillips being added at defensive line. Very good football team, Super Bowl aspirations. They've made good moves already this offseason, and I think they believe that they are going to have the opportunity to go even further this year. This is their window. This is their window. I mean, and still one of the craziest stats to me about last playoff season, I believe I have this right. If I don't, feel free to correct me, but I'm pretty sure through 2 rounds of the playoffs, Josh Allen threw 9 touchdowns, and he had 9 incompletions, and yet they didn't even make it to the AFC Championship game, which is just absolutely bonkers when you think about that out loud. So that's a look at the Buffalo Bills, Super Bowl contenders.
We play all of these teams.
Division favorites. Yep. AFC if they're not the AFC favorites betting wise, they're number 2 maybe. All right. That brings us to the New England Patriots. And what have the Patriots done so far this offseason? They added, of course, Mack Wilson from the Browns via trade. Former Brown Terrence Money Mitchell as well into the mix. They signed running back, wide receiver Ty Montgomery, formerly of the Saints. They brought in Malcolm Butler of the Cardinals, and Butler at this point, he's not the same guy he was, but Butler is not necessarily a big starter, but somebody that they're going to use to try to replace J.C. Jackson, who departed in free agency, signing a huge deal with the Chargers. So here's what they've got right now. They've also brought in Jabril Peppers. Did you see that? Signing a 1-year deal.
Yeah, we talked about that yesterday.
With the New England Patriots. So when you think of the Browns on this list of people that they've brought in this year, Mack Wilson acquired in a trade for Chase Winovich. Money Mitch on a 1-year deal, free agent. Jabril Peppers going to be on a 1-year deal, a free agent. Brian Hoyer re-signing on a 2-year deal, staying with the team. They added, as I mentioned, Montgomery. They kept James White on a 2-year, $5 million deal. They re-signed Trent Brown, their tackle, on a 2-year, $22 million deal with $4 guaranteed. Re-signed guard center James Ferentz. They re-signed linebacker Jawan Bentley on a 2-year deal worth $9 million. They brought in Malcolm Butler on a 2-year contract. They re-signed Devin McCourty, their all-world free safety, on a 1-year contract worth $9 million. Then a couple of special teams moves. Re-signed Nick Folk on a 2-year, $5 million extension. And special teams ace, multiple-time Pro Bowler Matthew Slater, 1-year, $2.6 million deal. So who have they lost? Honestly, it is a lot. It is a lot. So the headliner, J.C. Jackson, who leads the league in interceptions over the last, pick the number of years, but since I think he's been in the league, leads the league in interception, he goes to the Chargers. They trade Shaq Mason to the Bucks, which was a starting right guard for them. He leaves and goes to the Bucks. They also lose Ted Karras, their center, goes to the Bengals. Brandon Bolden goes to the Raiders, as does fullback Jacob Johnson, Bolden running back. And then still unsigned, Jamie Collins, Dante Hightower, and Kyle Van Noy. Winovich, of course, traded to the Browns. But not a big one. They retained some key players in Brown, McCourty, and James White. Didn't make any other splashes, but the departure of J.C. Jackson was massive. That is huge in terms of for the Patriots. Go ahead.
This team could go from second place to last in the division this year.
They could. There's a lot of talk, though, that they're trying to bring in, that they're one of the teams, maybe one of the teams that are looking at DK Metcalf, trying to get him or a Tyler Lockett out of Seattle. So something to keep an eye on there. All right, next up, the Miami Dolphins. And, boy, what an offseason the Miami Dolphins have had, and it centers around one thing and one thing only, and that is the acquisition of one Tyreek Hill, acquired in a trade with Kansas City in exchange for a 2022 first, second, and fourth, 2023 fourth and sixth, and a 4-year, $120 million extension with $72 guaranteed. Now, they also signed Taron Armstead, 5-year, $75 million deal, so they get the number one tackle on the market. They get, the number one vertical threat in the entire league. Then you bring in 2 running backs who can run this Mike McDaniel offense. Raheem Mostert, 1-year deal, $3 million. Chase Edmonds, 2-year deal, $12.6 million, including $6.1 guaranteed. They bring back Preston Williams. They signed Cedric Wilson to a 3-year, $22.8 million deal before the trade to get Hill. So now they've got Hill, Waddle, Wilson. Devontae Parker could be on the move. Wouldn't mind him here with the Browns. Mike Gesicki, their tight end, they sign him to the franchise tag, so he's back. Durham Smythe, a tight end, also back. They sign a guard, Connor Williams, 2 years, $14 million deal. Agba, former Brown, re-signs, 4-year, $65.4 million that pays him $32.7 over the first 2 years. They keep linebacker Duke Riley. They keep linebacker Landon Roberts. They keep linebacker Brennan Scarlett as well. They also brought in Teddy Bridgewater. 1 year, $6.5 million, fully guaranteed, up to 10 in incentives, and there's a lot of talk that he will be competing with Tua for the starting job. But boy, did they make a lot of splashes. And you think about the it's basically all in. It's basically all in for them. Tyreek Hill, Cedric Wilson at receiver, Edmonds and Mostert running back, Bridgewater at quarterback, retain Gesicki, get the top tackle in Armstead, get a great guard, Connor Williams. You bring back Agba. This is a team that absolutely thinks not only is it a playoff team, they think they're going to compete for something special. Because what did they lose? Jacoby Brissett's now a Brown. Duke Johnson's with the Bills, both in backup capacities. They have an offensive lineman, Jesse Davis, who's a swing guy, goes to the Vikings. Corner Justin Coleman goes to Seahawks. That's it. Phillip Lindsay, Malcolm Brown, running backs, didn't do much for them. Will Fuller missed most of the year. Alan Hearns hurt. Albert Wilson hurt. I mean, they didn't lose anybody of consequence.
No.
And they brought a lot of significant pieces in. And I'm talking about of consequence from the starting role. Duke Johnson played great for them last year. Brissett played well for them as well. Will Fuller just never materialized. This is a team. They also have Sheldrick Redwine, by the way, down there in Miami. They brought him back as well, former Brown. This is a team that loaded up.
Well, I would say this too. McDaniel pilfered Kyle Shanahan's staff.
Oh, yeah.
Took
take some of the
guys.
staff as
I
well.
believe Wes Welker is his wide receiver coach.
You are correct.
And he was the wide receiver coach in San Fran. There were a couple other guys that he took as well. So he's got a nice little thing going. It comes down to what happens at that quarterback spot for Miami.
It certainly does. And then there are the Jets, who I think made some nice moves as well. They were pretty aggressive. They were the worst pass defense in the league. They went out. They land former Buck safety Jordan Whitehead, former Seahawks corner DJ Reed to deals. Both are young, ascending players that Robert Saleh can continue to build around. Whitehead should not only help against the pass, but be a factor in stopping the run. Reed was into the top 25 free agents list heading into the season, 10 PBUs last year. A lot to like about his game. And so they held out to those two guys. DJ Reed, 3 years, $33 million. Whitehead, 2 years, $14 million. They re-signed LaMarcus Joyner on a 1-year deal, also a defensive back who had some nice years with the Rams. And other things, it's more kind of re-signings. Flacco's back. Mike White's back. Tevin Coleman is back. Braxton Berrios, 2 years, $12 million. He's back. And then they added 2 tight ends. Good ones. Tyler Conklin from the Vikings and C.J. Uzomah, 3-year, $24 million deal. And C.J. Uzomah was with the Bengals. They signed Laken Tomlinson, a 3-year, $40 million deal as well. Tomlinson coming from the 49ers to join this football team. They like these moves. They've made some moves, aggressive, nothing insane. Also bringing Solomon Thomas, former first-rounder, on the defensive line on a 1-year deal. They signed Greg Zuerlein, free agent from the Cowboys, on a deal as well. Greg the Leg. So who has departed the Jets? Jamison Crowder, we talked about him earlier. He goes to the Bills, as does Shaq Lawson. Safety Marcus May goes down to the Saints. Tackle Morgan Moses to the Ravens. Defensive tackle Foley Fatukasi, who a lot of people thought maybe the Browns would be interested. He goes to the Jags. Blake Cashman traded the Texans. Gerard Davis to the Lions. But again, not a lot of significant out, but definitely some significant in for the Jets in what is a competitive division, and the Browns will be facing all of these teams in 2022.
I was going to say, all of a sudden, this division, after one season, is kind of a laughing stock that ended up not being a laughing stock. They move into one of the top 2 or 3 probably divisions in football. With how good their potential is. I think the Jets player to watch is Mekhi Becton.
Yep.
They got to figure him out. They got to get him right on the tackle spot. And if he can play to his potential, which he really has not done his first couple of years, I mean, offensively, they will be a problem for a lot of teams.
They certainly will, and it's gonna be fun to watch that team. And again, just this whole that division. There are no layups in that division. You're going to have to bring it against the entire AFC. So when you thought going into it, maybe it wouldn't be quite as tough, you're going to have to deal with a great Buffalo offense, a Miami offense with a lot of skill position talent. New England's offense is the one that doesn't scare you right now, honestly. And then the Jets, they've got some talent on that offense. And I think, getting Elijah Moore into a second season, don't forget they've got Corey Davis, and a lot of people think they're drafting a receiver with one of their 2 early picks in the first round. All right, when we come back, part 2 of Andrew Berry and Chief Strategy Officer Paul DePodesta's meeting with the media at the owners' meetings down in Florida. Hour 2 of CBD rolling on. If a car, truck, or motorcycle accident has caused you injury, call the injury lawyers at 1-800-ELK, Ohio for a free case review. Elk & Elk is a proud partner of the Cleveland Browns. Before we get to General Manager Andrew Berry and Chief Strategy Officer Paul DePodesta, part 2 of their meeting with the media from the owners' meetings down in Florida. A little bit of news here out of the cross-country mortgage campus in Berea. The NFL Uso Tour is to take place in Alaska this year. And amongst those going will be Browns running back / receiver Demetric Felton. And joining him, Denver Broncos fullback Andrew Beck and Colts corner Kenny Moore. They'll embark on a week-long National Football League USO Tour to Alaska to visit U.S. troops and their families at military bases. The USO Tour resumes the annual trips after the COVID-19 pandemic had paused them for 2 years. They will visit an Army base, an Air Force base, and a Space Force station with a focus on seeing an array of base activities, including unit visits, one-on-one meetings for mission briefing, and visits with Security Forces K-9 unit. Additionally, each of the players will have the opportunity to spend time with service members and their families, having the unique experience to see a day in the life of our nation's heroes. And here's what Felton had to say about it. Quote, I am honored to take part in my first NFL USO Tour. My excitement for this trip to Alaska is at an all-time high to show my appreciation for our servicemen and servicewomen. My father served multiple stints in the military and moved around the country from time to time, so to use my love of football and support those who will make significant sacrifices and make our lives much easier will be life-changing. Felton joining this year's trip, something that has been done by multiple Browns alumni, Joe Thomas in 2010, running back Eric Metcalf in 2013, as well as former Browns and 49ers center Alex Mack in 2015 are among those Browns personnel who have participated in these week-long NFL USO tours, where they interacted with and thanked military personnel on multiple bases overseas. And we'll talk with Felton later this week about his excitement for joining that, the offseason, and how he's been doing. One of our favorites on the show. He's a good guy to catch up with. All right, we told you it was coming part 2 now. Andrew Berry and Chief Strategy Officer Paul DePodesta is meeting with the media from the owners' meetings in Florida now.
You guys are down 10 minutes.
It really doesn't. I mean, I know I've said this before. We really do attack draft free agency as if we're an expansion team. I think we can have an educated guess on some of the players who won't be available to us by 44, but by the same token, we want to make sure that we complete the work on all the prospects who are on our front board. I think a perfect example of that is JOK. We didn't necessarily expect him to be there at 52. And so you do have situations like that where you don't all of a sudden abort the work that you're going to do on a player just because you think he may not be there. There are surprises every year. So our prep process will remain the same, and we'll kind of zero in and finalize that over the course of the next month.
So maybe pick 22 gets there and you start watching and thinking about a trade.
You never know.
I mean, not that you wouldn't be watching to start.
You never know.
Yeah, I think the only thing that probably really changes, we'll go through a lot of mock exercises sort of leading up to the draft. But once you get past the first 30 or 40 picks, those exercises lose a lot of integrity because the board can go in so many different directions. You'd have to do thousands of them, for it to be worthwhile. So, not picking till 44, those won't be as valuable to us. But other than that, like AB said, I think everything's the same. Because even a normal draft, it's not as though we're just preparing for our first round pick. We're preparing for 3 days. So that doesn't change.
What I asked Kevin this yesterday too. With Deshaun coming in, a different style of quarterback, what gives you guys the confidence that you do have the right offensive staff in place and that Kevin is the right type of play caller to maximize Deshaun Watson's abilities?
Yeah, I think it's just Kevin's body of work. We view him as he's very smart, he's creative, he's adaptable. I think over the past 2 years, he's done a really nice job of showing flexibility in some really challenging situations, whether it's injury, COVID-related, you name it. And he also has a very clear vision that we think aligns with Deshaun's strengths as a player. So we feel really good about him crafting and designing the offense that will maximize our starting quarterback strengths.
And the release of Austin Hooper, I mean, does that sort of signal anything different in terms of formations, 13 personnel? I mean, are you shifting a little bit away from the more, you know?
Probably a better question for Kevin. I think it's fair to say that the offense will look a little bit differently than what we've seen the first 2 years, because we do have, we do have a quarterback with a pretty unique skill set. But how that shakes out within personnel groupings or things like that, ultimately we want to try and run the offense through our best players. And as our guys come back for the spring, as they compete during summer camp, that's ultimately what will dictate personnel. I think last year we felt like we had a strong tight end room, we had a strong running back room. We dealt with injuries and other things in the receiver room, so that's kind of how the offense morphed a little bit. And so that can be different each year.
I think you make a great observation about the 13 personnel, because I think that actually speaks to what our offensive staff is actually like. I think they're very adaptable to the personnel that we have available. And as AB just said, the offense is going to run through our best players. Last year, that happened to be 13. Now, we did run some 13 in 2020, but not as much, as we did this past year. But I think that's their philosophy, which is why I think we have no concern about how they're going to ultimately use Deshaun, because it'll end up being adaptable to our best players, and clearly he's at the forefront of that.
Do you have some indication, or any indication whatsoever, of how long the suspension will be, and when they might hand that back?
We've had an open line of communication with the league. They will work through their own process in terms of reviewing and investigating everything. We'll respect that, and we'll provide any information that they need as they really work through the process and work through a decision period.
Okay.
What went into Brissett being the guy to back up the show?
No, we so Jacoby was a guy that we really identified early in the process, really regardless of how differently the QB room could look. We think Jacoby he's shown in multiple environments to be an effective player when called into action. Still kind of in his prime and earlier in his career, and we know that he's like an A-plus person, A-plus leader. We've heard that from his time in New England, his time in Indianapolis, his time in Miami. And for an individual who's been in a number of different situations, a number of different offenses, and we still think has talent. He was a guy that was kind of on our short list of options.
In terms of Deshaun, we never really got to ask you guys about his unique skill set, because the press conference was what it was. So, for fans, just from a football standpoint, tell us about his unique skill set, and then I'm also curious as to know why you guys traded away from him then in 2017 and how that all went.
Yeah, so Deshaun, obviously his last year in the league, he led the league in passing. Might have led the league in completion percentage as well. So very accurate, can win from the pocket, can win out of the pocket, can throw off platform. He's a very good decision maker, and he's also a quarterback who's able to create with his legs. And whether that's with the read option game, whether that's making a playoff schedule, whether that's buying time and throwing down the field, that's pretty unique, and that's pretty hard to find. So that obviously opens up the playbook for an offensive staff and an offensive coordinator in terms of what a coaching staff can do with that skill set. And he also makes it where you don't necessarily have to be perfect as a play caller, right? Where he can make a bad play good with his arm or his legs. So that's something that was really exciting for all of us.
For both of you guys, you've drafted early guys that were 20 or 21, and I know you like the player, but how important is age when you start to sort through all that stuff at the top of the draft?
Yeah, I think age is certainly a consideration. It's not the end all be all. I think you look at sports, or quite honestly even in other industries, that you do see that many high performers show themselves at an early age, and there is some signal in terms of players or prospects that have great success very early in their college careers. But at the same time, the path of the story matters, right? We want to make sure that we have the right context around that. Just because someone played when they were young in college might have been because they didn't have a scholarship athlete at the position. If someone played because they were older, it might have been because they were behind an All-American or they switched positions. So that context does matter. but it's something that we take into account with the final picture.
And I'd say each person's different too, and you have to take, sometimes age can be just sort of a proxy for experience, or even for physical maturation, emotional maturation, whatever. But it's not the same for all people. I mean, if we were solely focused on age, like we would have missed Cooper Kupp, right? I think he was 24 or something like that when he came out. So it's not like you have to be young to be obviously a great and dominant NFL player. And just because you're young doesn't mean you're ultimately going to be good, right? But like AB said, it's a factor that we look at, but we really try to look at it in the context of the person. Like, what does it mean for them physically, emotionally, et cetera, and not just that they're biologically young,
In terms of Deshaun, I just saw recently, I think Sean McDermott was saying that he doesn't want Josh Allen to run as much as he has in the past. So just in terms of the enormous investment that you have made in Deshaun, what will be your feeling on him running around all over the place and risking another torn ACL?
I think for us, we do think Deshaun does a good job of protecting himself as a ball carrier. So he does a pretty good job of not taking a ton of hits. We do want to use that part of his skill set. So, we will use his athleticism. We will use his ability to carry the ball. I think the big thing is we don't want him to take unnecessary hits or unnecessary contact. But, that is an element of the game that we're not afraid to use in the offense.
Obviously, quarterback is the main answer. When you look at the division, you have to have what to win in the AFC North right now?
I don't know that there's a specific formula to win in the AFC North. I think that you see across, and I should back up, the number one goal is obviously to win a Super Bowl, right? And
back in 30.
Winning your division, but I don't know that we necessarily subscribe to the notion that you have to have this set of athletes, this specific roster construction to win in the AFC North. I think a number of different, you look at the teams last year, right? Cincinnati's basically a spread offense that throws the ball around. Baltimore, they utilize the unique talents of their quarterback and are one of the most, dominant run games in the NFL. Pittsburgh, despite the fact that, they're kind of considered this kind of blue-collar team, they were really a spread offense. And then with us, we were a Y zone system that was predicated on play action. So we don't really subscribe to the notion that this is what a AFC North champion has to look like. There are a number of different styles that can be successful.
Come back.
And that's Andrew Berry and Paul DePodesta wrapping it up there at the owners' meeting. I like the little discussion on the offenses there. It's basically spread offenses, and then the Ravens are different. You can be very different in this AFC, but the bottom line is whatever you do on offense, you need to put points on the scoreboard. That will be job number one, and that's why getting Deshaun Watson was important from a football standpoint. You heard him. Very accurate, excellent decision maker. He's able to create with his legs, whether that's RPOs, off-schedule plays, extending plays, running. Got a great arm. He opens the playbook up for the staff and that there are no limitations in what they can ask him to do. And you don't have to be perfect as a play caller because he can make bad calls good. That's what the great ones can do, and they can make everybody around them better. And that's the first time we really got to hear them and talk about what it is they're getting in Deshaun Watson, the football player, because the press conference, and appropriately so, was focused on the non-football portion of this, which is significant, and we've said that and documented said our piece on that many, 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 many times. But from a football standpoint, you're getting a quarterback who is all-time NFL leader in completion percentage for players who have thrown more than 1,500 passes, 67.8%. We're talking about a guy that led the league in passing with 4,800 yards without DeAndre Hopkins on that roster in Houston, by the way, and who is just incredibly talented and able to, as we said, produce at a level that we really have not seen many quarterbacks be able to produce in the NFL as a passer and as a runner. And you look at his numbers for his career, and this is the stuff that gets you excited, right? It's not just kind of the chunk overall basic numbers, but 104 touchdowns and only 36 picks. 67.8% completion. Since last year in Houston, he completed 70% of his passes for 4,823 yards, 33 touchdowns, and only 7 picks. He averaged 8.9 yards per attempt. For his career, it's at 8.3, 12.3 per completion, 104.5 quarterback rating. I mean, these are just unbelievable numbers for a quarterback. And then you get into what he's able to do with his legs. For his career, he averages basically 420 yards rushing and 4 rushing touchdowns per season. He rushes for about 30 first downs a year. The last 3 years, 37, 29, and 31. So last 3 years in the league, this guy is, he is a weapon at the quarterback position. Incredibly effective, incredibly productive, accurate decision-making. The football skills are off the charts, which is why a trade like this gets made. Oh, Gibby.
A couple times.
Come on, Gibby.
I think that not only does he make plays, he makes everybody around him better. The guy's in the right place a lot of times. He makes the right throws. You said it best in your interview yesterday with him, or the conversation you brought up. He thinks him not playing last year will help him tremendously here. And we talk about it, but to hear an athlete say it, I didn't play. I wanted to be out there for whatever the case might be.
Sure.
He did not play. And he said that year off, you can't put a number on how much that will benefit me going into this season.
Yeah, think about it. He's been playing this game for as long as he has. It's been over a decade since his body has probably been able to take no hits like that whatsoever. So, yeah, that is a big thing for Deshaun Watson, and he will be coming in here as fresh as he can. Now, he said he's been throwing, and I'm sure he can't wait to get out here in April for the OTAs to get this football team started and get this offense together, getting ready, because there are going to be – I'm going to tell you right now, there will be things for guys that have been with the Browns for both years of Kevin Stefanski. There are going to be things that are going to be in the offense that were not before. It's just a fact. There are things that Deshaun Watson can do at the quarterback position that other quarterbacks can't do. And in the passing game, but more in the RPO game, some of the design runs, things like that. Now, of course, Baker did have the great design run to clinch the playoff berth on a quarterback sweep a couple of years ago against Pittsburgh in Week 17. That was awesome, but this is just a little bit different of a runner in Deshaun Watson. As we talked about the last 3 years, he's averaging over 450 yards rushing per season, and he scored 15 rushing touchdowns in the last 3 seasons, that he played. So that's pretty good.
Yeah.
That's another dimension, the ability to extend drives. He averaged, like I said, 30 first downs a season. That's basically, over 32. It's 29, 31. That's 60, 97. So 32 a season. That's basically 2 times a game he extends a drive with his legs. And that's something that the Browns just have not had. And so that is going to be a good thing for this Cleveland Browns football team. All right, Gibby, we decided we're going to move Jordan Reed to tomorrow. Is that what we decided? Was that our final decision?
Yeah, we'll talk about Jordan's piece tomorrow.
We'll do that tomorrow, and when we come back, we'll do a little better or worse. ESPN NFL Nation's reporters getting together, talking about where teams rank post-free agency. We still got the draft to go, so I'll tell you what, I bet there are a lot of teams in the AFC in the top I bet at least, without looking at it, 13 of the top 20 will be in the AFC, and I think 7 of the top 10 will be in the AFC as well. We'll take a look at that when we return here on Cleveland Browns Daily. Welcome back to Cleveland Browns Daily. Nathan Zegura and Gibby. Jason Gibbs joining us right now. And folks, you need to know this. There's a lot of bad advice out there about gambling, from secret methods to picking lottery numbers to betting big when you're on a roll. These myths can lose you money and get you into a lot of trouble. So before you wager, find out what's real and what isn't. And you do that by going to keepitfunohio.com. Time now for Higher or Lower, presented by the Ohio Lottery, or as I like to call it, Better or Worse.
Hi.
Gibby?
Hi.
Hello.
Normally you kind of do the, give it.
Take it away.
That's what I was waiting on. I didn't want to step on you.
All right. I appreciate that.
This week, compliments of our friends at ESPN.com. Okay, we did the power rankings post-free agency last week from NFL.com.
Yes.
ESPN.com has put theirs out within the past day and a half.
Okay.
So I thought we'd have a nice little fun exercise, maybe compare the two, and also figure out what they have, what they don't have right, and mock them if need be. And the NFL Nation, obviously, with ESPN.com, they always ask their NFL Nation reporters a question. And they said what the next offseason move should be. So first and foremost, ESPN.com has us ranked 16th in the National Football League.
What?
Post-free agency. Says their next offseason move, compliments of our friend Jake Trotter, would be to re-sign Jadeveon Clowney. It is the one remaining glaring weakness on the Cleveland roster as pass rusher opposite Myles Garrett. Clowney has been looking around with hopes of getting a big money deal. The Browns need to convince him that Cleveland is where he needs to be after he shined there in 2021. So, not a lot of love.
And we were 14 in the NFL Network?
Yes, we were 14th in the
Look,
NFL Network.
The fact of the matter is the Cleveland Browns, with Deshaun Watson at quarterback, are a top 10 team. And this, I guess as soon as people start, and maybe this is, they're just pretending he's not on our roster.
Or waiting to see
what it is.
The league says.
Sure. But the Browns with Deshaun Watson are a top 10 team in the league. The end of the story.
I would like to think so. All right, so if I'm looking, you said 7 out of the top 10 in our AFC. 2, 3, 4, only 5 of the top 10.
It's ridiculous. That's outrageous.
Those
It's
5
outrageous.
are Denver, the Chargers, the Bengals, the Chiefs, and the Bills.
Right now, if you told me, and by the way, they beat them last year, but if you were to tell me right now, first of all, the Browns are better than the Niners and the Cowboys. I believe that fully. And you're taking right now, I don't think there's any question that you're taking right now, but you're taking right now, are you taking Vegas over? Vegas beat the Cowboys last year. They're better now. I think Vegas is a top 10 team right now.
I don't know about that. Defensively, I mean,
Chandler Jones and Max Crosby, they got a good secondary. I mean, they've got Derek Carr's throwing the ball to Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfrow, and Darren Waller. That's elite.
By the way, your 13 out of 20 is correct because 7 of the next 10 are all AFC, including 6 in a row from 11 through 17.
Yeah, because the AFC is loaded compared to the NFC.
Yeah, I still think that's way too many NFC teams up there. So let's get right down to it there, Nick.
Higher or lower?
Number 1, the Buffalo Bills in both the NFL.com and the ESPN.com rankings. We'll go right to number 3 because number 2 are the Los Angeles Rams in both. So Bills 1, Rams 2 takes us to number 3 and the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, NFL.com post Tyreek Hill trade dropped the Chiefs to 9th. ESPN still has them as number 3 in their power poll. Higher, lower, or just right?
I mean, I think right now the Bengals have beaten them twice in a row, and you would say that on paper they're worse than they were before. So I would say that that is too high. They are worse than that, and therefore they need to have a higher number but be lower on the rankings.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Bengals better than them right now. I probably like the Bucs better than them right now. I think people are I think rumors of their demise are exaggerated. I still think they're going to be very, very effective. And look, they have a draft. That's the other thing. They're going to draft some receivers. They're still going to be good. Mahomes is very, very good. But loaded division. And so right now I would put Cincinnati ahead of them. They've beaten them. Bottom line.
So Diana Rossini from ESPN yesterday on Get Up had an interesting comment, and we talked about it on the show. She basically said the Chiefs are talking to a few teams about acquiring a big-name wide receiver.
Yeah, apparently they want DK Metcalf as well. Everybody wants DK Metcalf.
Sure. What's that asking price? And they've got 2 first-round picks.
Oh, they've got plenty of ammunition to do it. There's no doubt. It's just up to whether or not they want, or if Seattle's willing to part with them.
Correct. Next.
Higher or lower?
Number 4 in everybody's rankings were the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Takes us to number 5 was Cincinnati for ESPN.com. Number 5 for NFL.com were the 49ers. Number 6, the Green Bay Packers. Zegura, higher, lower, or just right?
I'm fine with where the Packers are right now. I'm not taking. I think the Chargers those are the 2 teams. Look, whenever you got Aaron Rodgers, you have Aaron Rodgers, and this is a team again that is going to add significant talent to their receiver room in this draft. There's no doubt about it. They're going to get better. Obviously, they lost Devontae Adams, but they will be definitely getting better at the wide receiver position, and Aaron Rodgers is that good. So I'm fine with it. On paper, you would say that the Chargers are that team. You bring in J.C. Jackson, you trade for Khalil Mack, you retained Mike Williams, you've got Hubbard. I'm a little bit worried about their offensive line. That's the one thing in a division where everybody can get after the quarterback. But, yeah, I think it's fine. I'd keep them. I think that's a sweet spot. Fine with it.
I would drop them. After the Adams trade, you also lost Valdez-Scantling. So now,
he never even was much.
Okay, but you have Alan Lazard, you have Randall Cobb, and Amari Rodgers. Rob Domofsky says you can make an argument that the Packers don't even have a top-tier number 2.
Absolutely,
much less a number 1.
But that might not be true after the draft. What if they drafted 2 of them? I think the receivers are going to go like hotcakes in this first round.
I would agree.
Christian Watson's going in the first round. Write that down. North Dakota State kid, he's going to go in the first round.
Look at you spewing hot takes about the draft.
There you go.
1 month from now.
That's right.
Impressive.
It's the only position I feel like I have any clue about is receiver.
That's fine. We'll start educating.
And now I don't even need to think about quarterback, and it's been that way for quite some time, honestly, which is wonderful.
Next.
Higher or lower?
The Chargers come in at number 7. Takes us to number 8. The San Francisco 49ers. Higher, lower, or just right? This is one of those teams that probably shouldn't be in the top 10.
I mean, well coached, but now Kyle has lost both proteges, or one's a head coach and the other's the offensive coordinator of the Jets. And one of his other proteges is the head coach of the Green Bay Packers and been very successful. Still, very good defense, very good ability to run the football. Debo, Kittle, Ayuk, they've got a lot of talents. The division got easier with the departure of Russ. But I don't know. I'm curious about what they're doing at the quarterback position. This is where, I put the Broncos ahead of them. This is where the Browns come in for me, would be ahead of them. You could even make the case that the Ravens, getting a healthy Lamar Jackson back and getting, Dobbins and Gus Edwards back, that this is a team that should be on the rise. I like the Raiders. This is where I'm not ready for the Niners to be top 10 right now because I just don't know. I don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
With Trey Lance, I don't think they're top 10. Now, they believe that their potential is going to be bigger, but how long does that take? How much time does that take? Is he ready? And if they're talking of keeping Garoppolo, a lot of that probably has to do with keeping his trade value up, but at the same time, does that also mean that they are not 100% confident in him?
Next.
Higher or lower?
The Cowboys, number 9. The Broncos at 10. The Titans at 11. Number 12, the Ratbirds. Baltimore Ravens. They've had a nice little offseason from a free agency standpoint. But they are number 12. Higher, lower, or just right?
And we'll talk about that. They're a team that I think is better than number 12, but so do I also think that the Raiders are better than number 12. I think the Browns are better than number 16 where they are. So where would they ultimately end up? They're in that mix. They're a team. They are certainly a team that believes that they can go to the playoffs. They believe they can win the AFC North, and they believe they can go to the Super Bowl. I mean, and there's 8 of those teams. I think those 8 teams in the AFC right now, or all 4 of the teams in the AFC West, have to believe that. The Raiders clearly have to believe that if the moves they made. The Bengals, the Browns, maybe even the Ravens in this one. In the AFC South, I don't know if anybody actually believes that they could go to the Super Bowl. And the AFC East, certainly the Bills.
You have to think that, I mean, the Colts don't have a bad team.
No, and maybe they think they can, but I put them more in the playoff thing. But when you make a move for Matt Ryan, you're probably, you're saying, maybe we can get this done.
I mean, their quarterback issues kept them from doing a lot last year. It's just interesting. After number 9, Dallas was 9, Denver's 10, Tennessee 11, Baltimore 12, Vegas 13, Colts 14, Patriots 15. I don't know why there's so much love still for New England in all of these power polls. The Browns are 16. The Dolphins are 17.
Dolphins are a talented football team. I mean, it's loaded, man. It's loaded.
Again, I feel like the Colts probably should flip-flop maybe with the Dolphins. Like, the Browns should definitely be ahead of the Patriots.
All of these teams should be up. All of these teams should be up. I really think that all those AFC teams talked about need to be up. The AFC is stacked. I just don't know, but there's also going to be some cannibalization of record because you got to play. In the AFC West, you have to play those teams 6 times. We play the AFC East, so the East and the North play each other. Those are going to be tough matchups all around. It's going to be awesome. This season of AFC football in particular is going to be incredible, and the playoffs are going to be all potential Super Bowl games, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, the only other 2 teams after Dallas in the NFC, Arizona at 18.
And then Philly.
And Philly at 19.
And I think the Vikings aren't that bad either, and I think they're 21. But, yeah, it's the AFC is loaded. Loaded. NFC is not loaded. The NFC feels like there are 3 teams right now that could represent them in the Super Bowl. And those are the Rams, the Bucks, and the Packers. Now, could a 49ers team get hot? Could the Cowboys take advantage of not a great NFC East and end up with a 1 seed and maybe make a run? Maybe. We just never seen them do it. We haven't seen them do it. All right, we'll be back. So much more to come here, wrapping it up on Cleveland Browns Daily. All right, coming up tomorrow on Cleveland Browns Daily, Mike Clay from ESPN joins us talking about his latest position and unit rankings. So we'll have that coming up for you. If you didn't get it again, be sure to get the podcast so you can hear all of Andrew Berry and Paul DePodesta if you joined us mid-show. For Gibbe, I'm Nathan Zegura saying thanks for listening to another edition of Cleveland Browns Daily. The next level is next.